So today we're gonna look at an exercise that we've played with before that can be really useful in um, doing what's called anchoring a particular state. You know, giving yourself ready access to that state or easier access. And today, you know, it was funny this morning. I was thinking about when you're really on your game, and it occurred to me it's game day. It's Super Bowl Sunday. I'm not a big Super Bowl fan, but I may watch a little bit. So I thought I would record this video for being on top of your game. You know, and I imagine that these players, hopefully on both teams, they're really on top of their game. You know, what you want to be able to show up when the moment comes. You want to be able to show up and give it your all and be your most resourceful self. So the way we're going to do this is the first thing we're going to do is take a moment and think of, I would say, at least 2 or 3 examples of times and places where you were really on your game. So it could be a flow moment that things were flowing for you, or you were just like very focused and directed. And I thought about this beforehand, so I already gathered a couple of examples for myself in talking about this exercise. But what I would recommend is if nothing has occurred to you yet, I would recommend, pause the recording for a moment and really give yourself time to start thinking of times and places where you were just like really on your game, because we want to get at least 2 or 3 really juicy examples. And so we'll start with those. And I'm assuming that by now you've found a couple examples. So you paused the recording and you found a couple of examples. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through them one at a time and take an inventory of our state, which we've done many times. But if you haven't done it in one of my recordings, you get to do it now. And we'll do them one at a time. And you can even cycle through them more than once. What we're looking for in this way of doing it is we're looking for commonalities. Like, what do these experiences have in common that we can use as sort of a handle to access those experiences? And one thing you may notice is as we're doing this, hopefully you're going to be remembering other times where you maybe were even more focused or on your game. So I'm thinking of my first example, which was years and years ago. And the first thing I do is I'm going to mentally put myself back to that time and that place. And so do that now. Take a moment and go into that first experience when it was actually happening. And just notice how you were feeling in your body. Anything that calls your attention, how are you feeling? How are you standing or sitting? How are you breathing? What did it feel like to be you in that moment? And notice how you were breathing. Notice if you were moving. If you're moving, how are you moving? What sort of gestures? And let yourself do those gestures and stand that way or sit that way now. Also notice anything that you were seeing at the time or anything you were picturing. And anything that you might have been saying to yourself if you had some internal dialogue. Sometimes it might even be a sound like, "Ooh, this is going to be great." So go through those one at a time, just with the first experience. What's going on in your body? How's your breathing? What are you picturing? What are you saying to yourself? What are you hearing? And whatever you're feeling in your body, notice where you feel it also. Maybe there's a movement of a surge of feeling. Just notice that. Okay, and now you can let that experience move to the side for a moment and take another one. Take another time when you just felt like exceptionally on your game or in the flow. Maybe you knew just what to do, just what to say. And again, notice what you were feeling in your body. Notice how you were breathing. Notice what you were picturing, what you were looking at. And again, notice any internal dialogue. And if other times and places have started to come up, make a note of those so that you can do those as well. So that's 2 examples. Let's let that go to the side and take a third time when you were, again, just really in the flow and everything was going your way. And again, notice your breathing, notice your body, notice any sensations. Where are they? What sort of gestures do you make? What are you picturing? Any particular phrase that you say to yourself in those moments? Any key words that come up? So that's 3. And if you want to do this again later, if you want to strengthen it, there are a couple of things you can do. You can add some of the other examples that may have come up for you, or you can actually continue to cycle through these. Very often, if people cycle through these experiences, they get even stronger. Another thing you can do is, we've talked about submodalities. So if you notice that there's something you picture when you are in this state, you can make that picture really big, really bright, really vivid, rich, 3-dimensional, so that it really starts to get your feelings charged up. And you can enjoy that for a minute. Okay, so now let all that go and just come back. You can shake that off and sort of return to a neutral state. Now, what did you notice in common? You may even want to take a piece of paper and jot down what were some of the commonalities. Were there commonalities in terms of how you were standing, how you were gesturing? What was your breathing like? Key phrases, things that you were picturing. Any of the pictures from any of those experiences will tend to act as an anchor for you to help bring you back to those states. So write down all those commonalities, because that can be a powerful anchor for you alone. So now, anytime you want to access that state, you can shift your posture in that way, or say those phrases, or make those pictures. But let's do something else. Think of a time when, or a couple times perhaps, when you weren't on your game, where perhaps you were stuck. Now, for this exercise, I wouldn't go for the biggest, most catastrophic, difficult day of your life, but I would go for a day where you just didn't feel like you weren't quite on. And again, you may want to pause the recording and find a couple of those, because what we're going to do is we're also going to take an inventory of those. And then we'll have a recipe for both. And eventually we'll be able to move from one to the other. So again, find a couple times or places where, just for whatever reason, maybe you couldn't think of what to say, or you know, no matter what you were trying, things weren't working out, or you were just having a less than optimal day or state. You just couldn't get yourself going. So take a moment and do that. And again, let's take the first one of those, a time when you were just sort of stuck. And again, notice what's going on in your body. I notice for myself, for example, that my body gets really stiff, and I start to freeze up a little bit. My breathing gets very shallow. So again, notice for you what goes on in your body when you're in that less than empowered state. What goes on in your breathing? What are you picturing? Especially notice, is there anything that you say to yourself in those moments when you're kind of stuck? Now you can let that one go. Take maybe one more another time when you just couldn't get things going. You were just really stuck for some reason. And again, notice your posture, notice your breathing. Notice what you're picturing and what you're saying to yourself. What kind of incantations do you have when things aren't going well? So now we looked at 2 of those. You could look at more. 2 or 3 should be enough. And maybe next to the things that you wrote down for the first experience, write down any commonalities from this. Were there commonalities in what was going on in your body? Are there commonalities in things that you say to yourself, or things that you picture, or where your breathing is at? Now you have this menus for both sides. And it's really interesting. Sometimes you can take one element. If you look at, okay, how was my breathing different? And you just, you can still picture one of the ones where things weren't going so well. But if you introduce the breathing from the one where things were going well, how does that begin to shift the experience for you? Or if you change the internal dialogue or the tone of voice, or what you say in the disempowered one to the one where you are really on your game, notice, does that shift the experience? And of course, you can shift them all. The only thing we're not shifting is really the context. So if one was in a particular context, we're going to leave the context alone, but maybe we're going to stand differently. We're going to breathe differently. The things we say to ourselves. I sort of lean in when I'm on my game. So I lean in or I lean back casually because I feel like I got this, like no problem. And that's one of my phrases. So I recommend that you practice sort of mapping from one to the other. Change first one element at a time and see which one starts to have a cascade effect of really shifting you to that sort of game on kind of state. So that's the whole exercise. And what you can do now to, like I said, to deepen it is, you can even get a couple more examples of times when you're really on, and fill out your list a little bit more. It's always good to review and take an inventory of those experiences. After you do it a number of times, I think it'll blow your mind that, like, oh my God, this is so available to me, and I may not have realized how easily I could turn it on if I just know the recipe, the proper steps. I heard a story. One of my friends went to a Tony Robbins event years ago, and Tony Robbins had them exploring something similar to this. And the only difference between for this one individual from their disempowered state to their empowered state was literally just this slight inflection where they let their chest go out. It's like that much. And Tony Robbins said, that's the difference. That little, half-inch shift in your posture is the difference between you doing well and being able to do something effectively and you completely throwing in the towel and going away. So it's worth taking the research, doing the research, and figure out your recipe and your map. And as always, I picked these states, like time when you were on, time when you were kind of stuck. You can do this for any state that you want to have more access to. If you want to have more access to creativity, more access to feeling curious, feeling open, feeling loving, abundant, whatever you want to experience more, you can use this exercise to have access to it whenever you want. So I hope you enjoy that. And if you are watching the game, enjoy that.